talks will likely target hotels frequented by foreigners in the city. Iran has also carried out strikes against what it calls separatist groups in the Iraqi region. Assad Bey has filed his fifth report on the outskirts of Erbil in northern Iraq.
There's been a series of strikes taking place across Iraq. There's been airstrikes targeting the Good al-Sufal area. We believe that's the headquarters of the Popular Mobilization Forces, a group aligned with Iran. No casualties are reported there. At the same time, there were 2 Katyusha rockets fired at the Haji military base. And again, at that base, we believe they are US forces. Now, the United States Embassy in Baghdad has warned its citizens that they believe Iranian-aligned groups are planning to attack hotels in northern Iraq, here in Iraqi Kurdistan, and urged its citizens to leave as soon as they could, and if they were going to stay, that they should reconsider their lodging options. Now, tonight we heard a series of explosions here in Erbil. Now, what we can tell you is that a hotel courtyard was hit by a drone strike. We understand that that drone was intercepted and it caused a fire. Now, that hotel is believed to house foreigners as well as possibly US soldiers. Now, at the same time, there's been a series of strikes targeting Iranian Kurdish groups. Now, northern Iraq is home to a number of Iranian Kurdish groups who are opposed to the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, US President Donald Trump has said that he would like to see these groups mount a ground operation, and it's been widely reported. Now, those groups, their camps have come under attack, their headquarters have come under attack, communication towers have been attacked by Iran, as well as Iraqi-based groups aligned to Iran. Now, we visited some of these camps to see the damage that has been caused by drones and missiles. Now, there's an alliance of 6 parties of these Iranian Kurdish groups. Now, we spoke to some of them, and we went to one group in particular and spoke to its leader and started off by asking him if his group had started a ground operation or planned to do so.
At this moment, no. We are not currently engaged in any offensive operations. We have been planning for a long time, and now that conditions are more favorable, there is a strong probability of action. We have yet to reach a decisive decision, but it is highly likely we will move forward with a ground operation. The Americans have contacted us through various channels, but until now we have not met directly, but they contacted us. They asked what we should do with this regime, what are the ways, and talking if we can cooperate together in the future.
In Lebanon, many of the people who have become internally displaced have ended up on the streets of central Beirut, sleeping in their cars or even out in the open. Bella Smith reports from the Lebanese capital.
Hussein al-Shakif shows us to his car as they fled Israeli shelling on their border village in southern Lebanon, with shrapnel raining down. With an aunt Amina, his son Ali, and wife Hoda, the family have spent the last 3 days travelling north, sleeping in their 2 cars that are packed with everything they could carry.
I went to get my car, and there was an airstrike. We barely made it out. We stayed on the road for more than 4 hours, moving a little at a time. In the end, we slowly kept going, and then an airstrike happened right in front of us. Thank God it didn't hit us. I had just recovered from the shock when another strike happened behind us.
Like tens of thousands of others here, they have nowhere to go, and no money to pay for a hotel or apartment. The government has handed over this stadium in Beirut to a charity that hopes to accommodate 5,000 people. Volunteers are learning how to put up the hundreds of tents that will shelter the displaced.
The main challenge now is preparing this area quickly so people can come in. It is not acceptable for people to remain on the streets for 4 days. Right now the site isn't ready. The toilets aren't working. There is no water supply, no electricity, no tents, and nothing on the ground to protect people from the cold and rain.
It's going to be another 48 hours before this place is in an adequate condition to accept anyone. Until then, people sleep where they can. Beirut's Corniche has become a campsite, and the city's public schools opened as shelters.
Everyone here just wants to know when they can go home.
For generations, Bay State Health has transformed lives across
wood, gas, and pellet stoves to expert installation service.
And in 21.
We're making our way to the southern city of Tyre. In the early hours of Thursday morning, the Israeli army issued yet another warning for people to leave areas south of the Litani River. As you can see, as we drive through the streets, traffic is very thin, shops are closed. People are worried, especially since there's no end in sight to this latest confrontation between Israel and Hezbollah. Human rights groups have criticized the Israeli army's evacuation order, saying forcing an entire population to leave their homes violates the rules of war. South of the Litani River to the border, this is 8% of Lebanese territory, and hundreds of thousands of people live in this area. The city has already come under attack. Israeli airstrikes targeting what it calls Hezbollah's military infrastructure. We are in the center of the city of Tyre. It was also repeatedly targeted during the last confrontation in late 2024. Attacks like this cause further displacement, destruction. Many people have still not recovered from the last conflict. Many homes, many buildings still lay in ruins. The country is cash-strapped. The government has not been able to help the people. People are poor. Israeli strikes also targeted electricity generators in the city. People here are telling us this is part of a strategy to make the city unlivable and to force people to leave. The Israeli military also targeted Qard al-Hassan branches. This is a financial institution affiliated with Hezbollah. The Israeli military really has been targeting anyone and anything related to Hezbollah. But as you can see, widespread destruction. This used to be a commercial district. So much damage. It is obvious that many have left this southern city. There are still those who have chosen to stay. The question is, for how long? Zana Khadr, Al Jazeera, Tyre, southern Lebanon.
What started as a conflict between the US, Israel and Iran has spread far across the Middle East. Juliet Ager takes a look at the countries that have now been impacted by the war a week after it began.
On the 28th of February, the US and Israel launched joint strikes on Iran. Since then, more than 100 cities have been attacked, and at least 1,300 people have been killed, including Iran's supreme leader. Iran was quick to retaliate, launching thousands of strikes towards Israel. One of the deadliest attacks was on the city of Beit Shemesh. But Iran also launched near simultaneous attacks on countries in the region hosting US bases. These are the countries that have been affected so far, and the missile interceptions are still taking place. Some of the attacks have hit US embassies, oil refineries, and even hotels. Then, on the 2nd of March, Hezbollah decided to attack Israel in response to the killing of Iran's supreme leader. And of course, Israel retaliated. The violence has sparked widespread displacement across Lebanon. On the same day, Cyprus reported that a British airbase had been attacked. Several European countries have decided to send naval assets to Cyprus following that attack. Then, on the 4th, Turkey said that NATO air defense systems had downed an Iranian missile that was heading into its airspace. The same day, the US said a submarine had sank an Iranian warship off the coast of Sri Lanka, killing more than 80 people on board. The ship was taking part in a military exercise in India and was heading back to Iran. Then, on the 5th, Azerbaijan became the latest country to be dragged into the conflict. Officials said drones had fallen near an international airport. 1 week on, what's clear is that the US and Israeli assault on Iran has spread far across the region.
Right, well, let's bring you some other news from around the world. People in Gaza are facing a shortage of essential supplies. It's after Israel shut border crossings into the Strip. Limited supplies are being allowed through, but it's nowhere near enough, as Hendra Khadri reports from Gaza City. Israel-Iran war started, the situation in the Gaza Strip is not getting any better, as the Israeli authorities announced all crossings in and out of the Gaza Strip are closed until further notice. In the past couple of days, only Kerem Abu Talib was open, and only approximately 150 trucks were allowed to enter between aid, commercial, and fuel. And these are definitely not enough for the 2 million Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip. We also need to know if the Rafah crossing is completely closed, putting thousands of Palestinians who need urgent medical evacuation to leave the Gaza Strip in risk because the fear of losing their lives. They need medical evacuation as soon as possible. Here, Palestinians are very scared that borders are going to close, they won't have access to food, and they're fearing another wave of famine. In the Qadari Al Jazeera, Gulf Palestine. For a second day, hundreds of Ukrainian prisoners of war have been released by Russia. This released captive was greeting his mother. The two sides traded another 300 prisoners each on Friday, and the exchange came under a new agreement reached in recent talks in Geneva. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the officers were defending the country's front lines. Torrential rains and heavy floods have inundated towns in Peru's southern Aina district. The Salcahuato River burst its banks on Friday, flooding homes and streets in the city of Ayacucho with mud and debris. Rescue teams have been deployed to the area to assist local authorities. Indonesia has announced a ban on social media and other popular online platforms for under 16s. The measure aims to protect young people from online harm. Indonesia's communications minister announced that platforms considered high risk will be deactivated from the end of this month. Since Australia became the first nation to implement a youth social media ban, several states are considering following suit. A crowd of thousands has gathered in Chicago to pay their final respects to the late Reverend Jesse Jackson. A towering figure of the US civil rights movement who died last month at the age of 84. Jackson was the protege of Martin Luther King Jr. and a two-time presidential candidate. 3 former presidents, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and Joe Biden, are attending the service in Chicago.
He was a connector of people and a lover of people. He really bridged the gap between all ages because he not only served Chicago well, and we know him as a hometown father to many, but he was globally and internationally known.
This man here, paved the way for so many to be able to make a difference in this world.
Everybody should know that. How Jesse Jackson lessons happen, it impacted our lives. Everybody.
In Nepal, the party of a rapper-turned politician is leading in at least 2/3 of seats after Thursday's general election. Tony Cheng has this report from Kathmandu.
A day after the election and counting is still going on all across Nepal. The Election Commission estimates they won't have a proper result for 4 days or as long as a week, and that's not surprising given the geographic complications of this mountainous Himalayan nation. But what we are seeing in the results that have been counted is a very clear shift to the RSP, the National Independence Party. What some people here are calling a blue wave. Now, we didn't have much of a sense before the election because of the tight restrictions the Election Commission put on polling information. That was what we were hearing from people that we spoke to, that they wanted to vote for a change. And the question now seems to be not is the RSP going to win, but by how much? And will they get the 2/3 majority that will allow them to change the constitution? Now, this also suggests that Balendra Shah, the charismatic rapper and former mayor of Kathmandu, could be heading towards the job of Prime Minister. It also signifies a huge change for politics here in Nepal, with people deserting the traditional parties that have ruled for decades. But it certainly seems to reflect what people told us as they were voting yesterday, and that's what they wanted to change. Tony Chang, Al Jazeera, Kathmandu.
It's just gone 03 GMT. I'm Imran Khan. I'm watching Al Jazeera's extensive coverage of the ongoing conflict between the US, Israel, and Iran. Now, the Israeli military says it's begun another wave of strikes targeting what it calls Iranian infrastructure in Tehran. Missile attacks have been reported across the Iranian capital. Earlier, the White House said its objectives in Iran should be met within 4 to 6 weeks. That's after Donald Trump said there will be no deal with Iran except unconditional surrender. These are the latest pictures coming in from Lebanon. Big clashes along the Lebanese-Syrian border near the Nabi Shit area. Fighters are attempting to repel Israeli incursion attempts. Israel has been striking the area and other parts of the country for several years. Iran has launched another barrage of missiles at Israel. Waves of strikes over the past week have caused extensive damage in Tel Aviv. At least 11 people have been killed in Israel since the conflict began. Qatar has warned of a dramatic impact of the widening conflict on the global energy market. The Gulf States energy minister says the violence has potential to, quote, bring down the economies of the world. Attacks on the region have continued on Friday, for alerts were sounded on Qatar and other Gulf nations hosting US troops. US President Donald Trump has commented on the conflict while speaking to the media at the White House on Friday.
By the way, in Iran, we're doing very well. Somebody said, how would you score from 0 to 10? I said, I'd give it a 12 to a 15. Their army is gone. They're just about, look, their navy is gone. Their communications are gone. Their leaders are gone. 2 sets of their leaders are gone. They're down to their 3rd set. Their air force is wiped out entirely. Think of it. They have 32 ships. All 32 are at the bottom of the ocean.
Now, our chief US correspondent, Alan Fisher, has more from the White House.
Donald Trump in the Oval Office said that the military is doing a phenomenal job. He, of course, suggested the timescale is somewhere around 4 weeks for this operation. Everyone around the administration seems to suggest that the US is ahead of that timescale. He's talked about an unconditional surrender. Caroline Levitt, the press secretary, kind of gave an outline to that, said either the Iranians announce an unconditional surrender and give up. Most people we speak to think that that's highly unlikely, or they are put in a position because of the US military operation that they can no longer stage any sort of fight back, that we don't have the men or the material to retaliate. But Donald Trump says that he wants to be involved in the selection of a new leader in Iran. He says he wants someone who is great and acceptable, someone who will work with the United States and also with Israel, but will also work with his Gulf colleagues. Now, we've heard from the Iranian ambassador to the United Nations saying that isn't going to happen. Iran is a sovereign nation. The people will select their new leader. But it suggests that with the unconditional surrender remark, that this conflict may actually take a bit longer. And that causes a problem. Now, we've heard from sources around Dan Kane, who is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that perhaps the US military doesn't have enough munitions for an operation that could last much longer than 4 weeks. That's been dismissed by Donald Trump, but he gathered those from the armaments industry at the White House on Friday. They had a conversation and they committed to quadruple their output over the coming weeks to try and meet the demand from the United States. And this comes as the State Department announces that they've signed a $151 million deal to sell more weapons to Israel, including 1,200 1,000-pound bombs, which obviously could be used in Iran. That suggests that we are going to see this 3rd stage that has been talked about over the last 48 hours or so, which those in the administration say will be a new wave and much more powerful than anything that has happened in the first 7 days in the war on Iran. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera, at the White House.
Now, joining us from Tehran is Abbas Aslani, a senior research fellow at the Center for Middle East Strategic Studies. The language coming from the US has been absolutely clear. Donald Trump says unconditional surrender. He says that the Iranians are basically being destroyed, one leadership segment at a time. Those statements suggest that there is no room for diplomacy. They seem to be backed up by Abbas Araghchi as well. How are those statements being taken internally?
Well, it seems that Iran is not taking those negotiation offers seriously, and there can be no chance for negotiations as the war is going on, because Iran is seeing the United States as a bad faith actor, attacking the country twice in the middle of the negotiations. The second point is that Iran is not seeing this as a bilateral matter and or battle, and it is somehow seeing a systematic violation of the UN Charter. That's why it is resorting to international community to stop this aggression, and also the chance of a negotiation could be somehow dead on arrival. Why? Because the terms that the United States is setting for negotiations with the United States equals total surrender, which is not the case for Iran. Iran is saying that it will not negotiate under aggression, and that's why there is no ceasefire in sight, and we are expecting to see maybe a new shape or phase of the conflict in the days or weeks to come.
Well, Abbas Araghchi was very clear about this. He says if the Americans want to come in on the ground, this will be a very different conflict. Here we are, 1 week in, Abbas. Where do you see this conflict in?
As we are about to enter to the day 8 of the conflict, we are seeing that the exchange of fire yet continues, and there have been some speculations or rumors about, let's say, ground conflict between the two sides, if not direct. But the United States and Israel seem to be mobilizing some Kurdish separatist groups from Iraqi Kurdistan to infiltrate inside the country from western borders. And that's why Iran has been, in the past couple of days, targeting Kurdish positions in Iraqi Kurdistan and sending IRGC ground forces to western part of the country. And this raises the question that maybe the United States is resorting to a
to sell a few spaces.
in the neighboring, let's say, sphere. So we have to watch and see that how things will emerge in the days to come. But it seems that at least for some time this conflict is about to continue.
Now, Abbas, there is a leadership structure within Iran right now. Ali Larijani, you have, on the religious side, you have Arifi, you have Masoud Pezeshkian as well, the Iranian Prime Minister. Now, where do you see this going in terms of politics? At some point, there's going to be a new supreme leader announced. So just break us down where you see the political leadership going.
Interim Leadership Council is in charge now to lead the country through transitional period until the time that the Assembly of Experts elects the new leader. This somehow signals continuity in the country. Maybe that's why Trump is not happy with what's going on. He wants to have a say in the election of a new leader, which Iran doesn't take seriously. Iranian officials have been mocking these remarks by Trump, US president, and we have been hearing some speculations about a likely leader, but the point is that the country has lost a leader, high-ranking commanders. Maybe this is creating a kind of, let's say, power vacuum in Iran. The longer it takes, it could have consequences. The officials here think that they need to quickly elect a new leader, because they need to find a focal point for different factions to unite, and also the chance of electing a new leader, also the risk of a new assassination against a likely new leader is also is a question. But the point is that the lengthened process of electing the leader, and a continued vacuum, its danger could be more than the assassination. So that's why we are also hearing from the members of the Assembly of Experts saying that they want to do it as quickly as possible.
Abbas Aslani there, live for us from Tehran. Thank you so much for your thoughts. Now, Iran has launched a series of attacks on Israel in the past few hours. Roy Challenge is following developments from Oman, and he joins us now from the Jordanian capital. It's very difficult to get information out of Israel about the size and scale of the attacks simply because of the military sense of them. But those attacks are still continuing.
Yeah, and Israel's right in the midst of one of those missile barrages at the moment. From where I'm sitting here in Jordan, I can hear the distant thump, thump, thump of Israeli air defense trying to challenge that barrage coming in. We understand that the targets were all in the central Israel area, and that's the second wave of Iranian missiles that have come in overnight. A few hours ago, there were similar attacks. We heard of sirens being set off and explosions in the sky over Tel Aviv. One of those missiles, it looks like, was a cluster munition. The Iranians said that they had launched one such thing. It's one of their Khyber Shekan missiles, which has been in operation since 2022. It's a pretty sophisticated medium-range ballistic missile, which has a maneuverable warhead. When it comes down in its terminal trajectory, it opens up and about 20 submunitions come out of it. Each of those has about 2.5 kilos of explosives in them, so you can see that that's probably quite a destructive weapon if it gets through. The Israelis have said, though, that no injuries have been reported from that earlier round of missile strikes, and there haven't been any reports of significant property damage either. One of the missiles, we've been told, fell into open ground. Another one was intercepted. But what the Iranians are doing, clearly, they've been launching wave after wave of missiles all across the country, all across Israel, from the north to the south over recent days. They're showing essentially that even though they've been under massive barrage from Israel and from the United States for a week now, that the US Pentagon has been saying it's been hugely successful, well executed, properly planned, fully punishing air attacks against Iran. Iran is showing that it still has the capability and the capacity to hit back. It still has missile launchers, it still has missile stockpiles, and it can do these wave after wave of rockets, and that's what it's showing by keep on doing this, and also not just Israel, of course, the wider region, as we've seen.
That's Rory Channels there live for us from Oman. Now back to reports of clashes along the Lebanese-Syrian border near the Nabi Chit area in the Bekaa Valley. Heidi Petz live for us in Beirut. Hezbollah saying that there's been fierce fighting in the Bekaa Valley area. Just bring us up to date.
Yeah, so those reports of fierce fighting from Hezbollah have been confirmed to Al Jazeera this evening by locals in the Bekaa Valley. What we understand is the Lebanese Ministry of Health has confirmed that 3 people were killed and 16 injured in airstrikes that went on before and after those clashes. And so we've seen a statement in the last hour or so from Hezbollah with their account of what went on in the valley this evening. They say that earlier on Friday evening around 10:30 p.m. they detected 4 Israeli helicopters coming from the east, so from the direction of Syria, that landed a group of commandos inside Lebanon, about 70 kilometers from the Israeli border we're talking about. So it's a significant distance from Israel and a significant expansion of their operations on the ground here in Lebanon. They say it took that group of commandos about an hour to reach the outskirts of a town called Nabi Shit. And once they reached the cemetery on the edge of that town, they were engaged by Hezbollah fighters, and you will have seen videos, and we've got accounts from locals of very, very heavy clashes and fire and exchange of bullets in the town of Nabi Shit. Hezbollah says that their artillery units were also involved and that they targeted the Israelis while they attempted to evacuate
We're waiting on any official statement from the Lebanese army or indeed from the Israeli side about exactly what went on there and indeed what the aim of that operation so far inside Lebanese territory might have been. But it has resulted in very, very heavy airstrikes across the Bekaa Valley, both during that operation, afterwards, and of course earlier in the day the Bekaa was experiencing a large number of airstrikes which may have been intended to soften the ground there. We saw a forced evacuation order for the town of Nabi Sheikh earlier on Friday afternoon as well.
But it's not just southern Lebanon, it's not just the Bekaa Valley as well, it's also happening right now in Beirut. Take us through what's happened elsewhere.
Yeah, so yesterday we saw very heavy airstrikes across the capital in the southern suburbs. Multiple parts of the Dahia, as it's collectively known, were targeted by airstrikes. It's actually been reasonably quiet overnight. There haven't been significant airstrikes here in the last few hours on the capital. However, in the south of the country, we have seen strikes this evening and ongoing clashes between Hezbollah, and they say that they have been, again, directly engaging with Israeli forces on the ground inside Lebanese territory. And also there have been a number of incidents of projectiles, so whether that's rockets or drones, fired into northern Israel, as well as anti-tank fire. And we had earlier on Friday the Israeli military saying that 5 of their soldiers were seriously wounded and another 3 lightly wounded as a result of fire from Hezbollah into northern Israel.
That's highly compared to their lifeless bomb Beirut. Iran is continuing to target Gulf nations hosting US troops. Saudi Arabia says it's intercepted 6 drones after an attempted attack on Aramco's Sheba oil field. The oil field is located in a scarcely populated desert region in the east of the country. Now, the US, European, Asian markets have been rattled by American drone attacks on Iran, and this is now entering a second week. Crude prices have surged as concerns mount about oil supply disruption. The international benchmark Brent crude has jumped to 92.69 per barrel, and that's the highest since 2023. That's up nearly 30% this week. The US crude oil futures are also up more than 12%. US stocks finished in the red for a second straight week. The S&P 500 fell by more than 2%, and the Nasdaq declined 1.24%, while the Dow's weekly loss of more than 3% was its biggest since early April. Now, the Asian markets are experiencing their heaviest losses in years. South Korea's oil suffered a massive drop of nearly 12% on Wednesday, forcing authorities to temporarily halt trading. It finished the week down 10.56%, and the Nikkei is experiencing its worst weekly performance in 11 months, ending the week down more than 5%. Now, Peter Maguire is Australia's Chief Executive Officer at Trading.com and joins us from Sydney. You just heard the report there from the markets, a lot of volatility. But the White House seems to be saying, well, that's only short term, it will recover. However, attacks on energy infrastructure are a very dangerous escalation.
Absolutely, and what we've seen, as you mentioned, over the last week has just been absolutely one-way traffic, and with Brent now trading above $92, and you've got West Texas Intermediate on the NYMEX, that was up over 12% for the session on Friday. It's cracked nearly $91. So the move to the upside is immense, and oil prices are up nearly 33% since going back a couple of weeks back.
Now, Qatar's energy minister has been very clear about this. He's actually said that this could tank global economies. Do you think that's a fair assessment from him?
Well, it naturally impacts as far as supply chains, and we all understand the Strait of Hormuz and what happens as far as restricting energy to countries and then the buying for that energy. Yes, it does have a dramatic impact as far as global economy and GDP, and we've got to work through this over the next week or two. Inflation naturally will start to pick up. But the other side, of course, is how long does it take for countries to get back on? And well, I read the papers as far as LNG out of Qatar, and they're saying it will take many months to get back to those supplies.
But in a weird way, isn't that pressure on the energy infrastructure exactly what Iran wants? Because it feels like if it can do that, then if you hit people in their pockets, they are more likely to try and end this conflict quicker.
You would think so, and there is a strategy behind that that makes a lot of sense if you're looking through the lens of Iran, and that could well be the case. As crude prices inch closer to 100, there will be an inflection point, and whether the Americans and certainly Israelis are prepared to walk away from the table and say that's it, or does the pressure start to mount? And in war, no one knows the actual outcome until when you look back in retrospect. So we've got to get to that point, and it's going to be a very interesting matter of, the next few weeks leading up to the end of the month.
Do you think the markets are reacting to then Iran's strategy, or the fact that Donald Trump doesn't really have a clear strategy, or is it a mixture of both?
Well, I think it's a mixture of both. I think the markets and market sentiment, we're looking as far as US equities, and they've certainly taken a leg down. US dollar index has jumped up, bond rates are up, and naturally the energy market. So gold's been very, very quiet if you're looking just volatility, but it's still where it is now, where it was this time last week. But energy prices are one-way traffic, and I feel as though 100 is going to be on its radar this week, and we may well be there by midweek.
Peter McGuire, thank you so much for breaking all of that down for us.
Thank you.
Now, US and Israeli strikes on Iran have triggered a spike in global oil prices. Countries across Southeast